What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a more rambly video, really. So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the channel turning 9 years old soon, and just some general thoughts about, how I feel about video games and everything else that goes into being a YouTube content creator these days, as honestly I keep so much of a focus just purely on the video games that I don't always get a ton of opportunities to talk about these things directly. And I mentioned this a little bit in yesterday's video, so I apologize if any of this feels a little repetitive here at the beginning, but this year is very busy right up until Halloween, which is the actual channel anniversary, and 9 years being just an odd number in general, I was just feeling a little pensive. Next year, for 10 years, I would like to do something special and a little more grandiose. I am tentatively thinking about ranking every single video game I've reviewed, which is in the hundreds. But that point is kind of what I wanted to hone in on a little bit, because I've reviewed a lot of games. I was looking into the actual number recently because of the 9 years thing, and it's around 200. It's hard to get an exact count for a few different reasons, because I've mostly used Steam, but I have reviewed games that are not on Steam, which makes it difficult to keep track of everything. But it's around the 200 mark, which is, needless to say, a lot of reviews, especially for a channel that honestly wasn't really doing reviews for a long time. I would say 2019, 2020 is really when I started moving into that space, albeit slowly, until I went at it full time in 2021. And that's when I started really increasing the pace, let's say. But it occurred to me that in reviewing that many games, chances are I have played more games than the vast majority of people likely ever will, especially when you start thinking about the stuff I have not reviewed at all. And there's still plenty of more to come, since I will hopefully at least be doing this full time for at least a few more years. Now, I say that not to alarm anybody, but I'm a realist first and foremost, and I do absolutely believe there will come a day that I put this down in some capacity, even if that simply means going back to treating it a bit more like a hobby rather than an all-encompassing, time-consuming job. But right away, even with that acknowledged, I will likely always continue to do this in some form as long as I'm physically able to do so. It's just what I love, frankly, and to drive that home, all the way back in 2015, 9 years ago, on Halloween night, when I was spending Halloween alone, shut in, playing video games, thinking about a job that I was working that I ultimately kind of hated, I decided to do something creatively with that energy, which was where the YouTube channel came from. And then I spent 6 years being real bad at it before finally getting enough traction to go full time and, still learning even then, which is especially funny because fast forward to today, I absolutely do this professionally, that's indisputable, but I also am still blown away by the videos other content creators put out, whereas mine tend to be super simple and to the point, trying to spend as minimal amount of time on editing as possible in most cases, and that is always really noticeable to me when I watch a content creator that has a less amount of subscribers but is clearly way more invested in the video aspect, and so many people just blow me out of the water on that one. Now, a large part of that is admittedly because a lot of my own editing is much more focused at, again, time management and just trying to make sure the main point is conveyed without really trying to make it fancy. Which brings me to one of the things I wanted to talk about here. A question I get all the time is how do you not get burnt out doing this? Because I work at a pretty breakneck pace compared to most people, let's be honest. It's a very normal pace for me. Even when I wasn't doing YouTube full time, I was still working 70, 80-hour weeks for just my regular job. That's just kind of the person I was, and still am in many ways, but I've just redirected that energy towards something for me as opposed to a company. But getting back to the question, the kind of funny thing about that is that I do get burnt out, just not on the thing people would think. I love playing video games. I could play them all day, every day, and I do for the most part. But that part is great. What actually burns me out, though, is recording audio. What I'm doing right now, this is a little easier because it's a little less scripted and I'm not trying to like make sure I hit this point and this point and this point, so it gets easier. But doing it in that manner, like 7 days a week, is exhausting. And there are absolutely days where I hate recording something, and I try to make sure that honestly doesn't shine through in the videos because nobody wants to listen to that. Sometimes making the videos burns me out, absolutely. Behind the scenes, I've kind of been thinking about chilling out a little bit on the everyday videos, but then my work ethic gets the better of me and I just kind of keep making them, which gets to a point where it's honestly a little bit obsessive, which is definitely a me thing. I think long term, when I'm feeling really comfortable, I might get to a point where I'm just focused on the reviews, the first impressions videos, and then anything else important that I feel like posting, like thoughts videos like this, or, like sales videos, things like that are interesting to me. And then any other day where I'm like, oh man, what am I going to do for a video? Maybe just let it rest instead of trying to make sure that I have something publishing. But again, mentally, that's been a hard thing for me to accept, even though I'm probably ready to do it. Now, some people might hear that and be like, hey, you could probably just hire an editor, right? And you're right, I could do that. But the second that I do, this channel is no longer mine, really. It becomes mine and this other person who's doing work for it. And that comes with its own responsibilities. Long before doing this full time, I led teams that were usually around 50 people, give or take, and that's a whole lot of work. What I learned from that experience is that you have to take care of the people that are working for you. And with an editor in particular, on top of doing everything else I do not feel like I would be able to continue at my current pace while also making sure that person is taken care of, and also simply continuing to feel like this channel is what I've made it out to be. As most people are aware, I have a son, and it does occur to me that one day he might very well look back at this channel to find out who his dad was outside of the context of, being his dad. And I mean, not just him, maybe even other family members at some point. But every time I think about that, I immediately reinforce that I want that experience for anybody in the future looking back at this to know that this was me. Every success, every failure, every single thing I've drugged myself through, it's on me when it comes to this channel. And that's important to me. And if it means that I have to do it by myself, then that is what it is. From 12-year-old me telling everyone and anyone that would listen that I wanted to play games for a living and review them and make guides for them, to all of the people that laughed in my face when they found out that my 6-foot-tall, tatted-up self, in fact, was a huge nerd who loved video games more than anything and reviewed them on the side of my very time-intensive job, all the way to now. And that has not changed how I feel about the games themselves. And if I wasn't so passionate about them, I doubt that I could do this full-time in any way. Because simply put, you don't review around 200 games on accident. Now, this next part, I really don't know how to feel about it. It was just a weird, similar feeling that I got recently, and that is that my old job, the one that I kind of hated, I stepped into a salaried management position in that business specifically because after having done it for around 4 years, give or take, I looked around and realized nobody had been there longer than me. Maybe 2 people that I started that job were still around. It was very high turnover. And as much as I didn't like it, I was good at it. So I decided to just, take that pay raise and continue on and see what happened. And while not exactly moment for moment, here recently I've been looking at everything that I've accomplished since moving to YouTube full time here, and it occurs to me that I've been doing this a long time. Some of the people that inspired this channel just no longer exist. They don't post anymore. And things have changed a great deal since then. Now, obviously, because it's YouTube, the exact one-for-one there doesn't hold true, but it was a similar feeling, which is why I wanted to mention it. Not to mention because, at the very least, video games as a concept for a YouTube channel can be a pretty, rough segment of YouTube to stay on top of, because it's very, specific. One thing I've been very blessed about in terms of being able to grow the channel is that a lot of people were really cool with me diversifying and covering different kinds of games. And while I'm known for CRPGs, a lot of people also know that I'll review basically anything that, piques my interest at all. And those videos have been lucky enough to also still do pretty well. Whereas I have seen other creators and other channels be really well known for a specific thing that does great numbers, but then, that game releases or it doesn't get any more updates and it just kind of stops. And then everything they try to pivot to just kind of flounders. And I think that's the closest thing you could consider to a high turnover rate in a normal job. And I tell you all that because I think it kind of plays a role in the mindset I get into, where I'm just like, just push through it and get this done, outside of just my own general work ethic, which I don't really know what to do about. It's just an observation, I guess. But the good news about that and, pushing through that and making these videos is, as I discussed in yesterday's video in particular, it's actually led me to try and appreciate a lot of games and genres that I otherwise probably wouldn't have tried. And that's been huge for me, just for the sake of expanding my own horizons and experiencing new things. And what it's done the most of by far is that it has kept video games fresh in its own way for me, because a side effect of reviewing as many games as I have and playing them as well is that if you don't go looking for those different experiences and different approaches, new innovations and those new approaches in general are going to dry up, and you're going to find yourself playing a lot of the same thing all the time. And while every once in a while a game in a genre will come out that sort of just like revolutionizes it or innovates it in a really fun way, those games are not that common, especially when you're reviewing as many games as I am. It has become extremely rare for me to play around with a mechanic and be like, oh wow, I've never seen this. Whereas when I experience a game from a different genre I am less familiar with, that becomes a much more plausible situation. Now, luckily, that doesn't keep me from enjoying games. I still love playing them. I mean, after all, let's be honest, the channel is known for covering one very specific genre of games more than anything else. And I eat those games for breakfast. I will happily play through them even if I have seen every single mechanic it offers. But I absolutely get where people are coming from when they say that those things are not something they enjoy, or that it turns your hobby into work or whatever else. Totally understandable to me, at the very least. But frankly, I love what I do. I did it for 6 years, not only unpaid, but it straight up cost me money for a long time. In fact, I remember one of the cooler moments for me personally on YouTube was when I started making enough and getting enough views every month to start getting paid every month. Because that was the point at which YouTube stopped costing me money and started making me money. So just those first couple months where I was finally making enough to cover the costs of editing software and, the games was really cool. And obviously, I really hope the channel continues to grow and continues to get big, but even if it doesn't and things go the opposite way, like people stop watching, views dry up, etc., I've always been doing this for as much me as anyone else. And whether it's one person watching or a million, I will do this in some capacity basically forever, as long as I am able, however you would like to put it. And I say that with the confidence of someone who has both, in fact, made videos that one person watched or a million people watched. So 9 years later, a couple hundred reviews later, I still love what I do. I wouldn't have it any other way. And while things will absolutely continue to change, and hopefully I'll be able to adapt to those changes as they come, it has been a hell of a journey either way. But I think that's pretty much where I'm going to wrap this one up. I really don't know what else to say. Beyond simply thank you for being here, joining me on this very long journey. I hope you stay here in the future, but whether you watch just this video or maybe all 200-something reviews, it means the world to me. From a homeless teenager to running my own business, reviewing and playing games for a living, and seeing that pay off my house and putting me in a position to properly set my son's life up for success is honestly just so much farther than I really ever thought I would get, especially when I was homeless at 15. And for all of those reasons, I really don't have the words to articulate just how much this has all meant to me, and I just wanted to take a moment to share that with everybody. So hopefully you've got something out of this video, and I suppose if you have anything to add, definitely drop it down below. But in particular, I'd like to maybe mention that now would be a great time to start throwing out ideas for that 10th anniversary video. Again, I have that general idea, but if somebody throws something cool at me that maybe I could do, I will absolutely think about it, because I would like to do something big, maybe even do a few days worth of something, but we'll see. In the meantime, though, that's where I'm going to wrap up this one. If you've listened to this whole thing, thank you so much for putting up with this incredibly rambly video. Always feels a little self-indulgent when I do these, to be honest. So, thank you. Truly, I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.